My name is Jack. I'm 73 years old. I live alone in a small red brick house in Syracuse, upstate New York. And if you look at me now, you might not see anything too much. Just a quiet, soft-spoken, time-stained old man. But I need to ask you something. Have you ever been treated like a nuisance because of something you didn't choose to carry? I say this because for weeks I tried to hide a lump in my neck. At first, it seemed like just a silly bump, but it grew and grew, and along with it came shame. I bought turtleneck shirts, wore a scarf even in the heat. It wasn't just for the looks, it was for fear of being seen as someone weak. Because when we get older, even a small detail becomes a reason to put us aside. And that's what they did to me. In this video, I'll tell you how this lump became a reason for refusing me a hug on my granddaughter's birthday, how he transformed me, in front of everyone, into the old man who should have stayed at home. But what no one knew is that my silence carried more force than any word spoken that day. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know one thing. That day, my granddaughter Emma's birthday, ended in a way I could never have imagined. I went there believing that I was still part of that family. I went with the hope of getting a smile, maybe a hug, but I returned home with a stained shirt and a broken heart. I still remember the exact time when everything changed, when she looked me in the eyes, hesitated, and took a step back. And worst of all, it was after that that something happened to my body, right there, in front of everyone, and made the party stop. It made the laughter turn into silence. If you've ever felt that your presence bothered you more than you cheered up, if you've ever been ignored by those who should hug you, then maybe this story is yours too. And if it is, I ask you, stay here with me until the end. Leave a like on this video if you can, and subscribe too. Not for me, but for all of us who have been left aside when we most needed a gesture of affection. Sometimes, telling a story like this hurts more than reliving it, and having someone listen makes all the difference. The invitation came in a way that already said a lot. It didn't come with a phone call, nor with a "we're waiting for you, Grandpa." It came with a folded paper left in my mailbox silently, a printed note signed by Claire, my daughter-in-law, just her name. No, with affection, or "we wait for you." It was almost a warning, not an invitation. Emma's party, Saturday, at 3 p.m. in the backyard. Is that it? I looked at it as if trying to read between the lines. Did they call me because it was mandatory? Why would it look ugly if I wasn't? Or because there was still a space for me in that family? I spent the week thinking about whether I should go, but the doubt was short-lived. It was my granddaughter. And even with everything, even with the distance that has grown between us in recent years, I couldn't accept the idea of not being there on her day. I went to the bookstore downtown and chose a gift calmly, a collection of classic tales with beautiful illustrations, hardcover. I remembered that I read the same books to Sarah, my daughter, when she was Emma's age. I read it so many times that I memorized the characters' dialogues. I bought the gift, asked to pack it with a light blue bow, and I kept it carefully in the bedroom closet. The night before the party, I grabbed my best shirt, the light blue one that Susan said suited my eyes. I passed with care, even with my hand already trembling. I put on perfume, I cut my nails, and before I went to sleep, I looked in the mirror longer than I should have. The lump in the neck was bigger, puffed up, red. It hurt to swallow. I tried to cover it with a scarf, but the fabric only irritated the skin more. I ended up letting the collar of my shirt go up a little and hoped no one noticed. But it was impossible not to notice. I woke up badly. I slept almost nothing. The side of the neck seemed to throb on its own, the heavy head. Still, I got up, combed my hair, put on my shoes, and put the gift in the car seat. Driving to Sarah's house had never been difficult, but on that Saturday, each mile seemed longer than the other. And when I turned the last corner and saw the backyard full of colorful balloons and people talking, I felt my heart beat faster. Not joy, but a warning. I didn't know what was waiting for me there. I just knew I had to keep my head up. I parked carefully. I stayed a few seconds inside the car with my hands on the wheel, like someone who needs courage to cross an unstable bridge. I took the gift, adjusted the collar of my shirt, and walked to the gate. That's when I realized no one came to receive me. No one saw me coming. I, who was always the first to prepare the parties when Sarah was little. I, who made homemade lemonade, hung balloons, invented games in the backyard. Now it was just another body going into silence. Claire saw me, yes. He saw me and turned his face. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He kept arranging the napkins on the table as if I didn't matter. I saw her father, Jim, talking to the other in-laws. He looked in my direction but said nothing. An old acquaintance who has shared so many barbecues with me now pretended that I didn't exist. And I, even so, smiled. I went to the gift table and placed the package there, carefully. The table was full of large, colourful boxes. Mine was small, but I knew it was, because it was chosen with soul, with remembrance, with old love. I went to where the kids were. Emma was playing with other girls near the inflatable slide. She saw me, and for a moment he smiled, a small, shy, but true smile. I opened my arms. I took a step forward, but Claire arrived first. He bent down, said something softly in Emma's ear. The girl looked at me again and hid behind his mother. My arm fell off, alone, as if it had lost its strength, and I smiled again, not for happiness, but by instinct, because sometimes we smile just to not let it show that our heart has sunk inside. I sat on a chair in the corner of the yard. The sun was beating hard, and the sweat mixed with the heat made my shirt stick around my neck. The lump seemed more alive at that moment, as if he was also ashamed to be there. I looked around, looking for some friendly look, a gesture, nothing. And you know, there is a time when we stop trying to understand and just feel it. I stood there quietly, as if I were part of the furniture, a forgotten plant at the bottom of the garden. Allow me to pause here and ask you something. Have you ever tried to be part of something, even though you know that place doesn't want you anymore? Have you ever forced a smile just to not collapse in front of others? Because sometimes that's not what they say. That's what they fail to do. The silence. It hurts more than any words. If you've ever felt this even once, comment below with a "I've lived it" or "It's true," because maybe knowing that we are not alone in this pain help it endure a little better. That party hadn't even started properly, but I already knew. I wasn't there as a grandfather. It was like a nuisance, a reminder that time passes, the body ages, and that for some, old people are no longer welcome where there is joy. But what I didn't know at that moment was that the worst was yet to come, something that my body would do, without my permission, in front of everyone, something that no one expected. Me, neither. The gate was ajar, and I stood still for a moment before entering. The sound of children playing, the smell of hot dogs in the air, the laughter spread around the yard. It all seemed familiar, but distant, like an old memory that you recognize but can no longer touch. Sarah's backyard was beautiful. Blue and lilac balloons, a long table covered with a patterned tablecloth, and a row of neatly arranged cupcakes. The white plastic chairs were all facing downtown, as if a show was going to start at any moment. And in the middle of it all, me, standing still, with the gift in my hands, trying to decide where I fit. In the past, on my daughter's birthdays, I was the first to arrive and the last to leave. I was the one who got my hands dirty, who inflated the balloons until I was dizzy, who set up the popcorn stand, took care of the children, cleaned up the mess. I clowned, imitated voices, made up stories. Susan laughed at me, said that I was more excited than the hired magician. Now, neither magic nor laughter. I was just the old man who arrived alone, with a small package in my hands and a visible lump in my neck. I walked through the gate calmly, holding the gift as if it were a shield. I walked slowly, trying not to look anxious. But no one came to meet me. No child ran screaming, "Grandpa." No voice shouted my name. People saw me, of course, but they reacted as if I were the delivery man at the supermarket or the curious neighbor who showed up without being called. Even the adults looked away too quickly, as if they were afraid that I would stop to talk. Claire, Emma's mother, saw me. I was near the grill, arranging the breads. She looked at me for half a second, raised her hand in a shy wave, but didn't even wait for the answer. He went back to what he was doing, as if I had fulfilled my role just because I had been noticed. Sarah. Sarah. My daughter was not there at the time, and maybe that was better, because I still harbored a foolish hope that she would smile when she saw me. Who would say, "Father," in the voice of a girl who still lives in some hidden corner of memory? I went to the gift table and placed mine carefully. Among large boxes, with exaggerated bows and shiny labels, mine looked out of place. But I knew what was inside. He knew the value of those stories. Stories that once rocked Sarah's own childhood, and that now, who knows, could create new memories in Emma's head. Even if, at that moment, everything indicated otherwise. I looked around, looking for my granddaughter. I was near the inflatable pool, playing with other girls. When he saw me, he smiled a little. Not that open smile of an excited child. A contained smile, as if he was testing if he could really smile. That warmed my chest. I approached slowly, raised my arm, called softly, "Emma," and it came. He took a step, two. But then Claire came from behind, bent down, and said something in her ear. Emma stopped. He looked at me. Then he looked at his mother, and he turned around. She ran back to the group of friends, as if she hadn't seen me. My arm was still raised when I realized that no hug would come. I lowered it slowly. I didn't make a scene. I didn't show anger. I just smiled. A hard smile, one of those that we can hide our shame. I sat on a chair that was near the fence, in the shade between two trees. I stood there watching the movement of the party like someone watching a movie where no one put you in the script. And the cruelest, it's just that no one has done anything openly wrong. No one offended me. Nobody kicked me out. But the absence of everything that was once simple, a touch, "it's good to see you," a plate of food in your hand, hurt more than any scream. While the children ran with the balloons, while the parents took pictures and the toast took place without me, I realized something difficult to admit. That party was no longer mine. That backyard, where I was once the king of games, was now a place where I had to ask permission even for silence. And it was there, in that icy white chair, with the sun beating sideways on my face and the lump on my neck throbbing like a drum, that I understood there was something changing. It wasn't just the body. It was the place I occupied in people's lives. And this place, it was shrinking, but the worst was yet to come. Because that same day, in front of everyone, my body decided to speak louder than my mouth, and no one, not even me, was prepared for what was going to happen. I sat in the corner of the yard, in the same white chair that seemed too cold for the heat of that afternoon. The sun hit my face sideways, highlighting every wrinkle, every shadow on my neck. The lump throbbed like a silent drum. I moved little, trying to appear invisible, but invisibility is never complete. From where I stood, I could hear bits of sentences, whispers streaking through the air like small knives. A distant aunt, whom I hadn't seen in years, commented to another, "He should be in the hospital with this swollen neck, not at a children's party." And the other replied, without lowering her voice, "This is not contagious, is it?" It hit inside me like a stone at the bottom of a well. I, who had taken medicine in the early hours of the morning when Emma got sick, was now seen as someone who could bring illness. I, who paid for consultations, health plans, medicines, was now considered a risk. The curious thing is that no one approached me to ask if I was okay, if I needed water, if I wanted to sit more in the shade. No. It was easier to speak softly and look at myself from afar, as if observing an unknown animal in the backyard. I tried to strike up a conversation with one of my oldest grandsons, Dylan. He had a portable video game in his hands. I said, "Hey, champion, are you enjoying the party?" He looked at me quickly and then pretended that someone called him on the other side. He walked away without answering. I stood there with my hand half outstretched in the air, waiting for a gesture that didn't come. I looked at the gift table. My blue package was lying in a corner, forgotten. No one had even taken off the noose. It was as if everything I had brought with me, the gift, the memory, the history, had lost its value the moment I got out of the car. I put my hand discreetly to my neck, trying to ease the pain. The lump seemed bigger under the sun. Not only bigger, it felt heavier, as if it were not just an inflammation, as if it were the weight of all the years of effort that no one else wanted to see. I took a deep breath so I wouldn't cough. Sweat ran down my forehead, but I stood firm. Because deep down I still hoped that someone would remember me, that someone would say, "Father, come here, sit with us," that someone would call my name. And that's what hurts. It's not the lump, it's not the body, it is silence, it is the unsaid. It's seeing the granddaughter you cradled in your arms, being taught not to get close to you. It's realizing that you've become the problem, the risk, the inconvenience. I could have left at that moment. I could have gotten in the car and gone back to my empty house. But something held me back. Maybe it was Susan's memory, who loved to see Emma singing Happy Birthday. Perhaps it was the stubbornness of the old, who think that if they stay a little longer, everything can change. So I stayed. I sat there, looking at the backyard that was once my extension, now transformed into foreign territory. I felt the pain increase and my heart shrink. And while I was there, motionless, a question kept popping into my head. How far does contempt go when we don't respond? Because I felt deep down that the silence was not over yet, that something was about to happen in front of everyone and that I would have no way to prevent it. The cake table was the center of everything. Balloons in the shape of a number 10 floated behind the pink tablecloth with silver details. The children gathered around, and the adults prepared their cell phones to record the moment. I slowly got up from the chair where I had been for more than an hour, as if approaching something sacred. With the gift still forgotten on the table and the sweat running down my back, I approached the wheel. Each step was full of contained hope. Maybe there, at the time of congratulations, I would find space. Perhaps it was at that moment that Emma would look at me and see the grandfather who had always loved her, not the man with the lump on his neck. I got closer, but before I could find a seat next to her, Sarah came over and said almost in a whisper, "Dad, stay further back, okay? Not to leave so close in the photos." She spoke with a rehearsed softness, as if apologizing without sounding harsh. But what she said, he cut deep. I'm no longer someone who deserves to be in the center. I'm a detail that, if it appears, spoils the frame. I took 2 steps back, one more to make sure it didn't get in the way. The other adults continued to fix the angles, fixing their hair, taking the children in their arms. I stayed in the back, next to the inflatable slide that was already deflated. That was my place now, between what was once a party and what is about to be dismantled. When the song started, "Happy Birthday," I clapped my hands slowly. My rhythm was different, my smile forced. Emma looked at me once, quickly. His eyes had a hint of doubt, maybe a mute apology, maybe just confusion, but she didn't move, and I don't blame her. Children learn through the eyes of their parents, and the eyes that looked at me, they taught distance. At the time of the photo, the photographer, a hired young man in a black t-shirt and backwards cap, asked everyone to squeeze in. "Come on, guys, everyone together," big smile. I tried to get a little closer, but Sarah looked at me again and shook her head, very subtly. I stayed in the same place. When the flash went off, I felt that it didn't hit me with the same force as the others. In the image that would come from there, I would be just a border, a shadow, a forgotten blur. No, I've been in the center of that circle. I was once the man who held the child in his lap, who blew out the candles with him, who got a honeyed kiss of icing. But now, all that I was out of focus. And it was there, in that photograph that had not even been developed yet, that I understood. I was no longer invited. It was just tolerated, allowed, out of courtesy. I'm here opening my heart, telling this story with every piece I still remember. If you are there listening, feeling together, leave a like on this video. Subscribe to the channel too, because there is still a lot that I lived and keep with me. And sometimes, sharing that pain with someone, even for a screen, makes it weigh a little less. But the worst was yet to happen, and when it happened, not even the photographer could pretend he didn't see it, because it was my body that decided to speak in front of everyone when no one else wanted to listen to me. And there was no way to hide it. Have you ever felt your own body surrender you to those who deny you? That's that. This part is coming. I went back to my chair, the one leaning near the garage, which no one occupied nor offered. It was the corner of the forgotten, but it was mine. I sat down carefully, my body already tired, and there I stayed, quiet. The music of the party continued to play in the background, the voices of the children mixed with the laughter of the adults, but it all seemed to come from another dimension, as if I were watching from the outside, behind a thick glass, where no one heard me knock. And then, in order not to sink into that silence, I began to remember. I remembered when Sarah was little and wanted a pink bicycle with a basket. I had no money. I sold an old toolbox that my father had left me, tools that I treasured. But I sold without thinking twice, and I bought the bike. At Christmas, she ran down the sidewalk shouting, "My dad is the best in the world," with that limp-toothed smile. That's why I did everything, to see that smile. I also remembered when her husband traveled to a conference in Chicago and Emma got sick, high fever, throat infected. Sarah called me in a panic. I went. I spent 3 nights straight on the couch at their house, getting up every hour to measure the fever, give the medicine, tell stories to distract the girl. Claire thanked her with a nod. He never spoke about it again. But I didn't do it expecting thanks. I did it because she was my granddaughter, because it was blood of my blood. And I also remember Sarah's technical course. She wanted to study graphic design. At the time, we lived cramped. I took a loan in my name, hidden even from Susan, to pay for the equipment. A computer, a printer, tuition, and every penny was worth it when I saw the diploma in her hands. She cried. I cried together, only now I was the one who cried, inside. There, sitting in that plastic chair, I didn't just feel the lump pulsating. I also felt the weight of everything I gave, everything I built, everything I gave of myself without ever charging. And now, all I got back was nothing. Silence. Indifference. The worst form of abandonment. The one that comes without fighting, without harsh words, without clear breakups. Only the distance that grows slowly, like a weed that takes over the house. I closed my eyes for a moment. I felt a slight dizziness. The steady hand on the arm of the chair was instinct. I tried to take a deep breath. The pain in her neck throbbed harder. Sweat ran down his temples, but I didn't want to get up. I didn't want to leave, not yet. Because even after everything, there was a part of me, perhaps the most silly, perhaps the most human, that was still waiting for a gesture, a calling, a memory. But no one called, and the worst thing is that the pain did not come only from the body. It came from certainty. I was the only one who remembered all this. They don't. To them, I was just the old man with an ugly lump on his neck, the nuisance that doesn't go well with cake and photography. And there, in that hot, heavy silence, something began to change in me. I didn't get up to complain. I didn't scream. But inside the chest, a knot began to form. And he was made of everything that was not said, of everything that was forgotten, of everything that was given and never came back. And it was at that exact point in the afternoon that my body really started to give in, first with a pressure on the back of the neck, then with a strange tingling. And the moment I tried to get up again, I realized that something was about to happen, something that not even the strongest of silences could prevent, because the body, when it gets tired of being silent, speaks on its own. And I was already screaming inside. The music played again, as if nothing had happened. The children were screaming, running around the yard. Someone was laughing loudly near the grill, and Claire was raising her glasses of juice for a lively toast. The world around me kept turning, but I I was stopped, immovable in the same chair leaning against the garage. No one came to me. No one asked if I wanted cake, if I was thirsty, if I needed anything. I was the only adult without a plate in my hand, without a conversation, without a smile. And even so, no one noticed. As if I had become part of the old decoration of the house, something that was once in the center of the room, but has now been pushed to the corner, covered in dust, no longer useful. The urge to get up and say something burned inside. Something like, "Sarah, I'm your father," or maybe, "I exist, you can't see." But the truth is that there was another force in me, older, more tired, that just wanted to stay there, quiet, watching. As someone who understands, finally, that there is nothing more to be said, I could try to scream, but no one else had heard my voice in a long time. The cake was cut. They sang another song. They took more photos. I saw Emma smiling, but not to me. I saw Sarah laughing, but not with me. I saw the parents of the other boys clapping, playing with their children. And I was there, on my granddaughter's birthday, invisible. They didn't even offer me a napkin. And all it took was a gesture, a look, a "come here, sit down with us." It didn't come. Who came? It was the dog. Oh, Toby, that half-old Labrador with greyish hair on its muzzle. He left the children's side and came slowly to me. He arrived, leaned his head on my leg and lay there. Without asking for anything, it just stayed. I ran my hand over his fur with affection, and at that moment I realized, of all the living beings at that party, the only one who welcomed me was the dog of the house. An animal, and that said more than any words. There, sitting in that chair, with the sun already starting to fall and Toby sleeping at my feet, I felt that the party was going on without me, and that perhaps it had always been like this, from the moment I became a widower. Since Susan left and I have become quieter, more withdrawn, more out of the photos, I just hadn't noticed how uncomfortable my presence had become. Or maybe, not even that, nor bothersome, alone, irrelevant. You know, if you've come this far, listening to every word of this story, it's because you feel what I felt. And let me tell you something that maybe only those who have been through this understand. Sometimes, what hurts the most is not being rejected. It's realizing that no one would miss you if you left. But even so, I ask you, stay with me until the end, because what happened after that, I could never get out of my head. I saw the cake being served, the children smeared with cover. I saw the gift I brought still in the corner of the table, with the bow intact, untouched. No one had even mentioned it, as if it wasn't part of the celebration, as if it were from a stranger, and in a way, era. That afternoon, I understood that for them, I was no longer the Jack who told stories, who made lemonade, who danced with the children in the middle of the yard. I was just the old man with a lump in my neck. And even with all this pain squeezing my chest, I stayed, because there is a part of us that refuses to leave before the end. We stay, even though we know that there is no more room. It's to be seen if anyone notices. Be sure. And there, in that shadow between the house and the gate, with the noise of the party echoing far away, I began to feel a different pressure in my neck. The lump. He was no longer just pain. He was a living, pulsating thing, throbbing in a strange way. I ran my hand over my shirt and felt the warm, stretched skin, as if something was growing inside. That pain. It wasn't normal. And worse, it seemed that it was accompanied by something bigger, something my body knew but still didn't want to tell me. And it was at that moment that I realized the body speaks when the soul is tired of whispering, and my was about to scream. It was late afternoon when I felt the sweat running down my back more insistently. It wasn't just the warmth of the sun. It was an internal fever, a body heat screaming that something wasn't right. The blue shirt, the one I ironed so carefully, trying to look like the same man as before, was already soaked in the collar. The fabric stuck to the skin, and the lump on my neck felt bigger, harder, warmer. Every time I swallowed, I felt as if a knife was lying down my throat. My head was heavy, my vision blurred, and for a moment the noise of the party was distant, as if I were underwater. I got up slowly. His legs trembled. I looked at the gift table. There was mine, still with the whole bow, the same way I left it. Nobody moved, no one noticed. I walked up to him, holding on to the chairs along the way to keep my balance. I took the package in my hands. It weighed almost nothing, but at that moment seemed to carry years of rejection. I walked across the yard to the car. No one saw me pass. No glance accompanied me. It was as if I were a ghost wandering among the living, and yet no one was scared. I opened the back door and placed the gift on the bench as if guarding a relic, a slow, almost ceremonial gesture. I could have gone in, started the engine and left, gone without a trace, but something stopped me there. I stood with the door open, the car waiting for me, and I thought, what if I go now? Will anyone notice my absence? I needed to know, because if you have a pain that hurts more than being rejected, it's discovering that your presence or your absence is the same for those who should love you. I took a deep breath and closed the car door. I went back to the backyard with slow steps, and this time not even the dog came with me. I passed a group of guests laughing out loud, and I smelled the barbecue mixed with the sugar in the cake. A smell that was once synonymous with joy and now wrapped my stomach. I leaned against a corner of the balcony. I needed shade, air. The lump seemed to pulsate on its own, as if it were alive, about to rupture. My hand trembled as I pushed the buttons on my shirt, wanting to loosen, to relieve the pressure on my neck. No one noticed. No one asked. I saw Sarah taking one last picture with Emma, the golden sun hitting her side, and I realized that I wasn't even part of the shadow of that moment. No, there are things that we feel, and we don't even need words to understand. Contempt, for example. He doesn't scream. He just walks away in silence until it becomes customary, and when you realize it, you've already become a landscape in the scenery of others, a vivid memory, but an inconvenient one. And that's when we understand. It doesn't hurt to be old. It hurts to be forgotten alive. If you know what that kind of silence feels like, that kind of emptiness, comment below with a "I know how it is" or an "I understand you," because sometimes all we need is to know that we're not feeling it alone. I stayed there, standing still. The sun now hid behind the trees, stretching long shadows across the lawn. I felt part of that shadow, and as everyone seemed to prepare to turn off the lights, close the boxes, and share the last pieces of cake, my body gave clearer and clearer signals. Something was wrong, and it wasn't just the lump. It was the whole set. The pain in the chest, the dizziness, the bitter taste in the mouth. And I knew, he knew that the worst was yet to come. Because when the body can no longer swallow what the soul silences, it finds a way to break the silence. And I was ready for it. And no one, absolutely no one, was prepared to see what would come next. I slowly returned to the balcony, more out of stubbornness than will. The sunlight was already turning golden, the kind that lengthens the shadows and gives a sad glow to everything. It was the end of the party. Adults began to stack plates, collect plastic cups, and children still ran from one side to the other, as if the world was made up of smiles and balloons. I stood there with my shirt glued to my body and the sweat running down the back of my neck, trying to balance between what I felt inside and what my body was about to do. The pain in my neck was no longer pain, it was pressure, something wanting to leave, something alive, a rhythmic, throbbing pulse, as if a drum were playing inside the skin. I breathed through my mouth to try to relieve it, and in that state, between their world and mine, a child ran. She was distracted, holding a piece of cake in her hand, and on the impulse of the game, bumped into me. It was light, but it was enough. I felt like a blister had burst inside my neck. An immediate moist warmth dripped under the collar of his shirt. I took my hand instinctively and felt the liquid thick, hot, almost sticky. Pus, blood, all mixed up. The light blue shirt stained in seconds, the fabric absorbing that mixture he had been carrying for weeks. The smell came before the reaction. An acidic, strong smell that mixed infection, sweat, and something that only those who have dealt with open wounds know. The warm afternoon air carried that odor quickly, and then came the screams. One of them was Claire's. He put his hand on his nose and took 2 steps back. Another was Sarah's. She put her hands to her mouth as if she saw a tragedy, but not knowing whether to run or pretend she didn't see it. The guests looked on, and the reaction was the same. Repulsion. A man whispered, "My God," as he pulled his daughter by the arm. A woman let out a "That's disgusting," without realizing that I was still there, listening to everything. "Emma, my granddaughter," she cried. I don't know if it was fear, shame, or just innocence, trying to understand why that dirty man, with a soaked shirt, scared adults so much. She looked at me with her big, moist eyes, looking for an explanation that no one was going to give, and I just stood there, standing, stationary, with his shirt stained and his neck burning. The pus flowed, slowly descended through the collarbone, soaking the tissue, marking my presence with a trail that no one could ignore. For the first time that day, everyone looked at me, not with affection, but with horror. The music stopped, the talks ceased. Laughter died in the middle of people's throats. Only the sound of the balcony fan was still spinning, trying to push that smell away. I saw the discomfort spread like fire in dry straw, people pulling the children, others moving away, as if I were a threat, a risk, a contaminated body that should have stayed at home, hidden, silent. But what no one knew, it was precisely the silence that brought me there. And you know what's crueler? It's just that I didn't feel ashamed, not at all. What I felt was relief. Because for the first time my body said what my mouth never could. They ignored me all day. They pushed me to the corners. They erased me from the photos. They even denied me the right to be sick. But there, at that moment, they could no longer pretend that I did not exist. I existed. I was bleeding. I stank. I bothered him, and there was no way to hide it anymore, and perhaps that was exactly what finally revealed the truth about what I meant to them. But the party... the party wasn't over yet. The worst was yet to come. Can you imagine what someone says after a moment like this? Well then, prepare your heart. Because what they said next, it was even more painful than the open wound on my neck. The music kept playing, but it was as if no one else heard it. The children's melody, which had previously rocked the children's laughter, now seemed out of place, sad. A song that played alone in the background of a wrong movie. And I was there, standing in the middle of the yard, with my blue shirt completely stained and the pus slowly running down my neck. The heat of the liquid mixed with the cold that rose up my back. The body trembled inside, but outside, I didn't move. I didn't make a scene. I didn't clean it. I didn't apologize. Shame for the first time, it wasn't mine. Claire was just a few feet away from me. She put her hand to her nose, looked quickly to the sides and approached a friend who had also stopped chewing the Brigadeiro. He whispered something, and I heard it. I heard it with all the letters. He should have stayed at home. The phrase came out with contempt, but covered with false care, as if my presence there was a mistake, as if I were a problem that appeared uninvited. But the note, Claire... The note was left in my mailbox. Sarah, my daughter. He stood motionless near the candy table, her eyes wide, her hands still in the air, as if she didn't know if she was coming to me or hiding. She didn't take a step, not a gesture. He just stared, looking like I'm a stranger, and maybe, at that moment, it was. The other people dispersed in silence. Some took their children by the hand. Others approached the grill, pretending they hadn't seen anything. Everything was slow, muffled. The party died, but no one declared it out loud. Death was subtle, like almost everything that hit me that afternoon. I stayed there, steadfast. The sweat mixed with the pus went down to his chest. The shirt stuck to the body. The pain in my neck throbbed like a cruel reminder that my body was no longer my ally. But still, I didn't bend down. I didn't turn my back. I just stared, one by one, without saying anything. Because sometimes silence is the only thing we have left when everything has been taken away from us, even the right to feel pain in peace. And, as strange as it may seem, at that moment, I didn't feel humiliated. I felt something else, a kind of clarity, a kind of hard but liberating truth. They could have ignored me all day. They could have hidden me from the photos. They could have denied me a hug. But now, they could no longer pretend that I did not exist. I existed, and it bothered him. If this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, help me carry it forward. Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think, because there are things that we can only bear when we know that there is someone listening. And I'm here telling you all this so I don't carry alone what silenced me so much. Sarah finally took 2 steps, but it stopped again. She was pale. She seemed more concerned with what others were thinking than with me. Claire was already collecting a few glasses from the table, speaking quietly to her husband. The party was falling apart before my eyes. Balloons were released, chairs were collected, and no one spoke to me. But one thing told me that what happened there, it was not yet the end. Because sometimes, when you think you've been erased for good, they find an even crueler way to tell you that you don't belong anymore. And that's exactly what happened. Minutes later, you want to know what they said to me after all this? So listen to what's next. Because it was this phrase that sealed, once and for all, the place I would never have again in that family. A dry burst cut through the air like choked thunder. It was a balloon, one of those red ones, accidentally stepped on by one of the children who was running distractedly through the yard. But at that moment, that sound pierced me like a sentence, because it wasn't just the balloon that popped. It was there that something inside me also broke for good. A simple noise which no one else seemed to notice, but which for me meant the end of any illusion. The party followed its path of dismantling. The adults, once animated, now talked in low tones, crossed looks, as if they wanted to leave without seeming rude. I saw a mother take her son by the hand and say, "Come on, it's enough." I saw another pick up the dishes in a hurry, while pretending not to see me. Claire closed the side of the balcony as if closing a curtain in front of a scene she no longer wants to see. And Sarah, my daughter, called Emma, my granddaughter, in a tone that would admit of no response. "Come inside, daughter." And she went, without looking back. I stayed there, alone, my feet still firmly on the ground, but my place no longer existed. I tried to go back to the chair where I was before, near the garage, but she was no longer there. Someone had taken it, used to stack plates or lean against the corner, along with the others. I stood up, no seat, paperless, without anyone. I ran my hand over my shirt, trying to remove the excess dry liquid, but the fabric was already stuck to the skin. The sun was going down, the sky was starting to tint the edges of the house orange, and I just wanted a corner to exist without being looked at as a mistake. It was then that I caught my eye on the dumpster near the fence, and there it was, the present. The wrapping I made myself with colored paper I bought at the pharmacy and golden ribbon cut with kitchen scissors. The gift I chose with affection, remembering the nights when I told those same stories to my daughter when she was a girl. It was in the trash, entire, not even open. That hurt me more than anything, because a refused gift is a clear gesture. It's someone saying without saying that what you have to offer is no longer worth anything. And you know, sometimes it's not the yelling, the fighting, or the argument that hurts the most. It is silence. It is to see your gift in the trash and realize that you were also placed there, bent, ignored, forgotten. And if you're listening to me this far, I ask you with my heart in my hand, stay a little longer. Because as much as all this seems like rock bottom, What happened next was even more profound, more decisive. I promise you'll understand why, because there is a phrase they told me soon after, that changed everything. Can you imagine what a daughter says to a father at these times? So get ready, because when I heard, I knew there was no going back. I was heading towards the door. I wanted to get my cane. I had left it there, next to the hangar, leaning right where I always stay when I come to visit. He was determined to leave, without making a fuss. To leave the way I arrived, in silence. But when I got close, I felt a presence. Sarah, my daughter. It stopped in front of me, not with a sudden gesture. He was firm, calculated, as if he knew exactly what he needed to say and how to say it. And that's when she spoke. 3 words, dry as old wood. I can't do it anymore, Dad. Is that it? I can't do it anymore. There was no anger in his voice. There was no screaming, just that icy intonation of someone who is no longer asking but informing. I stopped. I kept looking at her. That woman in front of me was the same one who once cried on my lap when she had nightmares, the same one I carried sleeping in my arms from the living room to the bedroom, wrapped in a pink blanket with teddy bears. But now he looked at me as someone who looks at a mistake that needs to be fixed. You need to understand, she added, as if I was the one who was being unfair, as if I were the intruder. It's not personal, she said. It's just that you're no longer well. That went through me like a knife. It wasn't the lump, it wasn't the pus, it wasn't the smell. It was me. It was the fact that I had aged, of having become ugly, nuisance, worn, a man who, for her, was no longer safe to present, a father who became an embarrassment. I didn't answer. I just looked her in the eyes, and the most curious, she dodged. She who had prepared so much to tell me that, couldn't hold her gaze, and I realized then that she wasn't telling me that just because of others. It was also for herself, to convince herself that she was right, that it was the best thing to do. I walked away from the door. I took 2 slow steps to the end of the hallway. No one tried to stop me. Nobody asked where I was going. And in that silence, I realized something I never thought I would feel. I was no longer a father. At least, not for her. And not there. I know there are memories that stay with us forever, and this will be one of them. Not because of what has been said, but because of what will never be again. Let me ask you something. If you're there listening to me, have you ever experienced something like this? A moment that marked you so much that you just had to close your eyes to relive every detail. If you have, share with me in the comments. It doesn't have to be a long story. It can be just a, I've been there, or I understand you, Jack. Indeed, these words, small as they are, make a company that no one imagines how much it helps. And look, if you think that was rock bottom, just wait to see what they did later when I tried to get out of there with a little dignity. Because what came next was not just rejection, it was a final message, and it was given in the worst possible way. I got into the car slowly, feeling my legs heavy, as if every step I took so far had aged my body another 5 years. The door creaked low when I closed. I didn't start the engine. I stood there, with both hands firmly on the wheel, looking ahead without seeing much. It was as if my eyes were still stuck back there, in that backyard that was already being dismantled without any haste. Through the windshield, I saw the balloons deflating one by one, as if the very air had given up on the party. The children no longer laughed. Some collected toys in the corner. Others ran into the house, called by their mothers, and the sound was muffled, as if the world around me had decided to push me away at low volume. Plates being piled up, voices now whispering, cutlery banging on bowls. Everything seemed to say goodbye to me. But without saying goodbye, I rested my head on the backrest, and my mind, stubborn, did what it always does when I try to escape. It threw me back in time, on Sarah's birthdays, my daughter. When she was Emma's age, maybe a little less. I remember one time when she cried with emotion, just seeing the cake with her name written in pink icing. I ordered it myself. I worked overtime that week, sold 2 tools from my collection to pay for that cake. and she hugged me with a force that dismantled me from the inside. He called me my hero. I remember the words. I remember the smell of the candy covering, the clothes she wore, even the music that played on the radio in the living room. And now, I wasn't even offered a slice of cake, not even a hug, not even a thank you for coming, Dad. The only smell that accompanied me was that of dried pus on the collar of my blue shirt, the same one I had so carefully ironed the day before. A fabric that carried more than sweat or stain. It carried my attempt at dignity, my last effort to appear whole. I didn't cry, not at that moment. Instead, I looked in the rearview mirror. The silver frame trembled slightly with the wind that beat through the cracks in the window. And there, in that small rectangle, I saw a scene that I no longer wanted to see. Myself, stained, old, rejected, and still trying to understand what had happened. It was at that moment that I did what my heart told me. I stretched out my arm, held the rearview mirror firmly with both hands and, with a dry pull, pulled it off. I heard the crack of the plastic breaking at the base, and I felt a strange kind of relief. I put the mirror on the passenger seat without saying a word. I didn't want to look back anymore. I no longer wanted to see the faces that denied me, the gestures that hurt me, the looks that condemned me without judgment. That was no longer mine. I took a deep breath, left the car engine running for a few seconds, but I didn't get out right away. I stayed there for a while longer, as if waiting for time to return, for someone to run after the car, for an apology to arrive late. But enough. It didn't come. No one appeared in the mirror that was now missing. No one called my name. Not even the dog, and it was in this void that I understood. Sometimes the greatest presence we need is the absence of those who no longer love us. But of course, you must be wondering, was that all, Jack? Did you just walk away with the mirror on the bench and your shirt stained? Oh, if it were. What happened after this withdrawal completely changes the story. Because when I left that place, I left something behind. And I took something else with me, which they would never have imagined. Are you ready to know what happened? Because now begins the most unexpected part of this whole story. The road back to Syracuse seemed longer than it did on the way out. The curves were the same. The lampposts with their yellowish lights still flickered in the wind. But everything seemed darker, as if the whole world had extinguished a part of hope along with that party. I drove slowly, almost silently, with no music, no news on the radio, just the sound of the tired engine accompanying me. There was a time when I had to stop on the side of the road. The headlights of the cars passed me as if I were not there. My vision blurred, but it wasn't because of the lump, nor because of physical fatigue. It was the head that hurt now, as if the memories had accumulated in an unbearable pressure, ready to explode the same way the lump did on my neck. I closed my eyes for a few minutes, breathing slowly, my hands on the wheel and my heart like a war drum, beating louder than the world around me. At the second stop, already near the Seneca River, I watched the city lights in the distance. I thought about how much I loved that city. It was there that I met Susan, my wife. It was there that I bought our first house, where she planted flowers in the front yard, and where Sarah learned to ride a bike. And now it seemed that not even the city recognized me anymore. Everything became small, cold. When I finally got home, the handle seemed harder, as if the door had also been touched by that contempt I had taken with me. I went in, turned on only the light in the hallway, and went straight to the bedroom. The house was silent, the way it had been since Susan left. But that night, the silence had a different weight. It was not loneliness. It was the echo of what I had lost. I dropped the keys on the sideboard, took off my shoes carefully, and went to the bedroom mirror. The same mirror Susan used to straighten her earrings before leaving for Sunday services. I looked at my face. The neck swollen, the skin stained, the eyes sunken. But I faced myself. For the first time that day, I really faced myself. I took off my blue shirt. It was hardened in the collar, stained with pus and dry sweat. But I didn't throw it away. I put it in a plastic bag, closed it tightly, and kept it in the back of the closet, behind the winter clothes. That wasn't garbage. It was memory, a memory that I didn't want to erase, no matter how painful it was, because there, on that shirt, was written a chapter of my life that needed to be remembered, not because of the humiliation, but for silence, the way I chose to endure everything standing, without screaming, without lowering my head. I didn't hold anger. I kept a milestone, something that one day maybe someone will find and understand, or maybe not. But at that moment, I knew some wounds don't deserve to be hidden. They deserve to be respected. The lamp in the corner still worked, even with the fabric yellowed by time. It was the same one Susan lit when she waited for me to be late from work, and he was there, like a silent watchman, casting a soft light through the wall. I sat on the edge of the bed, as I did before I blacked everything out. Hands in lap, body tired, but the soul was more awake than ever. Because at that moment, in the dark of my room, I began to understand that maybe it was all necessary. For what? I don't know yet. But a voice inside me said that the outcome had not yet happened, that something was coming. Something that no one at the party expected, not even me. And you, who are here listening to all this, have you ever stopped to think that sometimes it is in the silence of the empty house that life begins to speak louder? So listen to me well. What came after that? That's what really changed everything. Are you ready? Because what happened that week still takes my breath away to this day. The next morning I woke up before the sun even rose. The sky was still in a dark blue tone, almost graffiti, and there was that deep silence that only exists in the early mornings. The house seemed to breathe with me, slowly. I didn't feel hungry, just that old desire to prepare coffee my way, strong, bitter, almost black. But for the first time I didn't fill the bottle. I made only half a mug, and I put only one plate on the table, only one. The other has always been there since Susan left. It was like a stubbornness of mine, you know, as if I were saying to time, she still lives here. But yesterday, when I came back from the party, I understood that there are deaths that do not have a coffin or burial. There are ties that unravel without noise. And that seat at the table, it was no longer Susan's. It was the space where I waited for someone who would never come again. I sat down, drank coffee in silence. His neck still hurt, throbbing slowly like a dull drum, but for the first time that pain didn't embarrass me. It was mine. It was what was left of the battle of the previous day. And every scar, no matter how ugly, is a medal of those who survived something that many people could not handle. I finished breakfast, washed the mug calmly, and instead of going back to bed or turning on the TV, I went straight to the mailbox. It was early, but I knew that the postman had already passed. And inside, among beads and pamphlets, there was a small folded envelope with the seal of the local church. I opened it right there in the backyard. It was an invitation to the Saturday Bazaar. Nothing grandiose. A bazaar of used clothes, homemade cakes, handicrafts. And underneath, handwritten, was a little note. "Jack, we'd love to have you this year. Your help has always made a difference." That hit me in a way that I can't even explain. A simple, direct invitation, but one that reminded me that I still existed, that someone, somewhere, still saw me as part of something. Maybe he was no longer part of a blood family. But what if there were still other ways of belonging? No. There are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. So if this story is touching you in any way, enjoy this video and subscribe. Let's make this story get to where it needs to be. Because I know there are a lot of people out there with the table set for those who don't come back. I went back inside with the envelope in my hand, but with my head in a place I hadn't visited in a while. The future. Maybe not grandiose, not noisy, but a future of my own, in which I no longer needed to prove myself, in which it was enough to exist. I opened the closet, took out one of the older shirts, not the stained blue one. That one was left there, kept as a symbol. I chose a flannel one, comfortable. I washed my face, combed the little hair that was left, and looked in the mirror. For the first time, I didn't just see an old man rejected. I saw a whole man. Tired, yes, but standing. And sometimes that's already a victory. That's when the phone rang, and it wasn't who you're thinking, but he was someone who changed the course of history. Do you want to know who it was? So hold on tight, because what happened on that call, it was just the beginning of a surprise that even I didn't expect to experience after all. The phone rang, and when I looked on the display, I saw my daughter's name, Sarah. It was the first time she had called me since the party. I touched the side button and let it play until it stopped, without hesitation. At that moment I realized that something inside me had changed. Before, my heart would have raced, my hand trembled, and I would have complied on the first try, full of hope that she had repented, that it was all a misunderstanding. But no. 2 days had passed since I left with a dirty shirt, a dry face, and my soul emptied of illusions. And now I knew that silence carried more weight than any justification. The next day it was Claire who texted, cold, short. We need to talk. Not a "how are you" nor an "sorry for yesterday." Is that it? A message that seemed more like a warning than a request. I read it and deleted it. No anger, no rush. Only with the certainty that I no longer needed to put myself in front of those who already saw me as a burden. And you know what? It is liberating when silence ceases to be a prison and becomes a shield. What was once pain was now a decision. I chose to disappear. I turned off my cell phone and went to the kitchen drawer. I took that old agenda, where I still wrote down numbers by hand, as I did in the days of the dial telephone. I was tearing out sheet by sheet, name by name. I left only 2, the one in the office of Dr. Hampton, my clinician, and the one in the Syracuse Public Library. All the others, they went to the trash, along with the rest of the past that I no longer carried. The next day, I went to the library. I talked to the lady who organized the reading programs for the elderly. I introduced myself, said I had free time and a firm voice. She smiled, took a form, and handed me a book of short stories. Read this one to me, just a snippet. I read it aloud, and when I was done, she looked at me with wet eyes and said, "Your tone calms down." Those words gave me more than all the hugs that were denied me. They gave me a place, function, respect. In a small room, with plastic chairs and the smell of old books, I found an audience that listened, not out of obligation, nor by blood, but by choice. People who listened to me attentively. People who were grateful. There was a lady named Mabel who, after the first reading, held my hand and said, "You reminded me of my father. He also had a voice of calm wind." I smiled, and I kept it in my chest. More valuable than any birthday gift. There are moments in life when absence becomes presence. And when we stop running after those who don't want us around, peace comes walking alone to the door. I didn't care about anyone else. I didn't wait for any more calls. I changed the cell phone number. I bought a new one of those simple ones, with big letters. I only saved the contacts of the library, the church, and the pharmacy. I no longer wanted to carry the weight of waits that never came. I gave myself the right to start over. And look, if you've made it this far in history, it's because some part of what I'm saying has touched you. So let me tell you something from the bottom of my heart. Sometimes the biggest noise we can make is silence. A silence that does not beg, that does not justify, that does not explain. A silence that simply disappears and let others feel the absence as they see fit. And if I can make you a request, stay with me until the end of this story. There's still something I need to tell you. A part that no one expected, not even me. Because as much as I thought that chapter was closed, something was about to happen. And it wasn't revenge. It was life. It's life, my friend. He has a habit of surprising just when we think we've seen it all. Are you ready for it? Because I wasn't. And yet, happened. 3 weeks have passed since that day I chose silence. since I left that birthday without taking cake, without taking a hug. But I took with me something that cannot be bought or asked for: dignity. I had moved, not too far away, Albany, about 2 hours or so from there, but enough for no one to knock on my gate by surprise. A friend from the church pointed me to a community center for the elderly, and I went. I started by helping pack groceries, then reading books aloud on Thursday mornings. People liked it so much that they ended up calling me to stay, and I stayed. I rented a small apartment next to a small market, very simple. I took only the essentials: a few coats, my old radio, Susan's recipe book, and my books. I even took it to donate. I donated everything to the downtown library, and I left a note with them for those who would one day open those pages. Everything I gave was for love. But love, when it becomes shame, dies. Now, on the third Sunday after the party, the neighbor on my old street called me because he still had my number written down. He said that a woman appeared there. "Your daughter," he said. I was crying at the gate with an envelope in my hand. He asked me where you were. I said what I knew, that you had gone to help people who listened to you. I thanked him for the call but hung up right away. Not because I hated my daughter, I never hated it, but because I learned the difference between longing and regret, and when someone comes after you only after you're gone. The longing for her, sometimes, is just the echo of guilt, not a hug back. Claire, the daughter-in-law, was more direct. He called the church, left a message with the secretary. "We want to understand what happened, but there is nothing to understand. It all happened in front of them. They just didn't see it, and if they saw themselves, preferred not to feel it." The community center received a letter from them as well, days later. They asked for my address. I didn't answer, because that part of my story, I had already turned the page, and it was a blank page, clean, light. Last Thursday, after reading an excerpt from The Adventures of Tom Sawyer to Mrs. Ellie, a lady of almost 90 years old with a heart younger than mine, she took my hand and said, "You have a voice that embraces." I smiled, and that echoed in me the rest of the day. Because at the end of the day, all I wanted at that party was a hug. Is that it? Not present, not praise, not honor. A hug. And it didn't come, but now my voice embraced. And that was more than I could ask for. I think there are people who only understand the value of a presence when it becomes absence, when the smell of coffee disappears from the kitchen, when the lamplight no longer turns on, when the good morning on Sunday stops coming. Life is like that, full of absences that scream louder than noisy presences. And as much as it hurts, it is in this silence that the truth appears. Do you know what I learned? That sometimes what seems like an end is just a beginning with another name. And what looks like punishment, it can be deliverance. But fate, this stubborn one, still had one last surprise in store for me, something that even I didn't expect, and that he would change the course of everything again. Because, you see, a name came back into my life, a small name, but one that still carried everything. Do you want to know what that name was? So just wait to see what happened the next day. In Albany, the days began to have a different rhythm. I wake up earlier, walk slowly to the park that is 2 blocks from the community center, sit on the same wooden bench that creaks when I get down. I always take a hardcover notebook, the kind they sell for a few dollars at the thrift store on the corner, and a blue pen with a bitten cap, an old habit, and I write. I write letters that no one will receive. Some I start with "Dear Sarah," others with "My little Emma." These are not bitter outbursts. They are memories, pieces of tenderness that still live inside me, even after everything. I write about the first time I held my daughter in my arms, about Emma's voice calling me Grandpa Jack for the first time, about how Susan made the best chamomile tea in the world. I write so as not to forget that I was happy, even if today, to remember, I need to close my eyes. Here in Albany, no one calls me a nuisance. No one looks away because of my neck, which still carries the scar, yes, but it doesn't hurt so much anymore. I'm just Jack. The Lord of Stories, the library volunteer, the Saturday afternoon bingo companion. I even learned to use a cell phone better. A girl here at the center taught me. But I never saved Sarah's number again. Neither is Claire's, not out of anger, but because I finally understood. When we let silence work for us, it makes more noise than any scream. The other day, Mrs. Ellie, the same one who said my voice embraced, asked me if I missed my family. I took a deep breath before answering. He said, I miss the idea I had of them, but today I feel more joy for having found myself again. She smiled, and we stood there in silence, watching the branches of the trees dance with the wind. Sometimes peace doesn't come with answers. It comes with acceptance. I still take medicine. I still have to make compresses and, from time to time, go to the health center to control the infection that remained. But I don't complain. Because along with the body aches, the greatest pain is gone, the one we feel when we are invisible to those who should see us the most. Today, I am seen, not because he is the strongest nor the youngest, but because I allowed myself to be fragile and survive. And you know, there's one thing I learned living all this. Sometimes we need to move away to meet again. He needs to lose his ground to discover that he can still walk. You need to listen to silence to understand that it is also language. I didn't become someone else. I only stopped begging for love where there was only tolerance. This, my friend, changes everything. And when I say all this, it's not meant to cause pity. It's just because maybe you're there on the other side, experiencing something similar. Maybe your silence is also screaming. Maybe you are also carrying a lump that is not in the body, but in the soul. If so, stay with me until the end of this story, because something happened right here in Albany that made me believe in reunions again. And it wasn't with my daughter, not even with my granddaughter, but with something even deeper. Can you guess what it was? So wait just a little longer. It's time to tell you. Today, when the autumn wind blows here in the downtown garden, I sit on this wooden bench with a blue scarf in my hands. It's not to hide anything anymore. The neck bears only one scar now, thin, crooked, but clean. I leave it on display without fear, because there are marks that we carry not because of weakness, but because we survived. Time passed and Sarah didn't look for me again. Claire sent a letter, handwritten, but I preferred not to open it. I kept them in the wooden box that belonged to Susan, along with the letters I wrote to Emma, even though I don't know if she will ever read them. But I'm at peace. Today, I read stories to other elderly people. I hear stories that remind me that abandonment does not have only one face, but neither does welcoming. Here, they call me Mr. Jack, or our storyteller. And the other day, a young man, a volunteer, sat here next to me and asked if I wanted to tell something. I smiled, looked at him and said, one day I was denied even by the one I hugged the most, but I didn't deny myself, and that saved what was left of me, because that's what remains in the end. We can lose places, lose names, even blood ties, but if you don't lose yourself, there's still a way. The great lesson that this life has given me, with all the silences, lumps, closed doors, is that the love we give is never lost. Sometimes he just needs to find another address to flourish. And the respect, respect starts within. When I stopped begging for attention from those who looked at me with contempt, I gave myself the greatest proof of love I have ever received. And look, if you've stayed here with me until now, listening to every bit of this story, I want to thank you from the heart. His presence here was like a chair pulled to the side, a coffee served in silence, a good company on a difficult day. If this story touched you in any way, leave me a hug in the form of a like. It heats up more than you might think. And if you want to come back for another coffee with me, subscribe to the channel. There's always more history in the teapot. Tell me in the comments which city you're listening to me. I like to imagine each one in a corner of the world, but all sitting in the same circle. And it activates the bell, see? That way you don't lose when the coffee is brewed again. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.